Alexandra Kostoulas, and I'm the founder and executive director of San Francisco Creative Writing Institute. I was a longtime student of Jack's. I took his class for the first time in high school and worked with him all the way through all the levels of method writing, and it really changed my life. And I decided to get a degree in creative writing and literature afterwards from UC Santa Barbara, and went on and got an MFA in creative writing from Mills College. And I've been a professor of English for about off and on for 10 years. And then after that, I've been teaching method writing for 10 years and started teaching it as a standalone class. And then it sort of, the Creative Writing Institute wove around it and in San Francisco. And Jack was the first serious creative writing class. His class was the first class I ever took, and it really made the most impression on me of any class I had ever taken. And I've taken like 50 classes now because of all the degrees and stuff. And every time I teach something or writing to people, I always think about what Jack teaches in method writing, and I try to bring that into my practice as a teacher, a teaching artist, and as a writer. I'm a poet and a fiction writer, and I write essays on the creative process. And I'm really excited that you guys are here today. We're all nervous, so forgive us, but I like that we're all part of this Zoom and part of YouTube Live together. And this is our first official event that SF Creative Writing Institute is hosting this year. So I'm really excited that it could be with Jack Grapes and Natalie Skorykova. I want to also introduce you to Natalie. Natalie Skorykova teaches method writing in Ukraine and online, and she lives in Spain now. She is an amazing teacher. She has this huge following, international following as well. She was a student of Jack Grapes as well. And we did a collaborative reading earlier in the year around June, where we invited the method writers from Kyiv and beyond to come and share their work on our YouTube channel and in a Zoom. And they were amazing. And it was wonderful to work with her. And so she decided to do this. She wanted to do this event with Jack to promote his book, Exit Music. And it's an amazing book. I think it's groundbreaking. If you don't have it yet, you should definitely get it when he releases it again. But it has these beautiful paintings and a mix of commentary. It's very mixed media. It's poetry. It's a lot of things. And I just wanted to show it to you so you get a sense that it's about 3 pounds. It's a heavy book. It's something that you can really sink into. It has coffee table elements, but it also, I think it's groundbreaking in many ways because it weaves, well, you'll see when we ask questions, but it's a very beautiful book. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce Natalie. Natalie.
Yeah, thank you, Alexandra. First of all, hi everyone. And I want to say, Jack and Alexandra, thank you. Thanks for supporting the idea of this conversation, because yes, I wanted and I needed, because I remember when I just got Exit Music, I thought, wow, it's so beautiful, because it's really beautiful, the quality of the book, all these pictures. But when I read it, I was like, oh my God, it's the most incredible book that I have ever seen and I have ever read in my life. Because for me, it's not just like a normal book. It's not like a collective poems or like a novel. It's like a piece of art of writing. And that's why I offered to the title for this meeting, Art of Writing. The structure of this book just blows my mind. What we have here pictures. We have here pieces of...
The pictures are my paintings.
Yes, handwrite paintings. Yes, handwrite painting. Some of them I remember you painted on toilet paper, on napkins, on tissue.
I like to experiment with, what you're painting on. And I discovered that those napkins you get when when food, you take it out and they put those little, soft paper napkins. If you put watercolor on it, or even worse, ink from your pen, it absorbs it in a way that regular media paper or a canvas when you're putting oil on it doesn't do. So I did a whole bunch on napkins, and then I started experimenting with paper towels.
Yeah, so we have these paintings, but we also have pieces of prose and poetry, and we have what I call red notes. So, and what surprised me that I can read this book just by painting, and I will get a story. I can read this book just by pieces of poetry and prose, and I will get the story. And I can read this book just by red notes, and I will have a book about creative process, about how to be a writer. So here's like have 4 layers of structure, and we have book inside of the book. But what is more fascinating, that I can read this book from different places. For example, I can read this book from the end to the beginning. And usually when we read book like this, it becomes not interesting because like we have all answers in the end of at the end of the book. So that's why usually we read it page by page from the beginning to the end. That's what helps us to keep the story. But this book, no matter how I read it, it keeps the story. It's like these 4 layers. They're not just layers of plot, but it also like different directions how I can read this book. And it's I've never seen nothing like that. I mean, no matter how I read this book, it keeps the story. So my first question, Jack, how did you create that structure? How do you work with structure, and what helped you to create such an amazing structure? It's so unique that no matter how we read it, we always get the story.
Wow, that is such a big question. And when you say the red notes, for those of you that have the book, sometime when you see a painting in a museum, it will tell you when it was created and the size of it. And sometimes there might be a little sentence or two from the painter, and they call that signage. But I put the signage next to each painting in red, and Natalie calls it red notes, which I kind of like. That's a really big question because it goes to the question of structure and form and linear story. And when I really think about it, something occurs to me that we were talking about the other day. See, there you have a painting of a character, and you notice there's a lot of words in the painting. So when Natalie says there's 4 layers, there's really 5, because you could just read through the book, just reading the text of the words in the painting as a separate linear form. Although sometimes the words are really graphically part of the painting and not necessarily text, because there's one of the first paintings in the book, the text is a letter. It's called something missile, a letter, but it's all smudged by the watercolor. So you can't really read it. So the question becomes, are those words text to be separate from the painting, or are they actually part of the design of the painting, and they're not meant to be looked at as words, but just as smudges? So it's actually a 5-ring circus, which is my metaphor, because the text can be separate from the paintings, and then of course they are part of the painting. So now we have 5 layers. But your question about the structure, it goes all the way back to when I was about 11 years old, believe it or not, when I started writing and decided I was going to be a writer. And my father was a Marxist, and I learned that very early, and he had books in his library. And once you start reading, I started reading Das Kapital, which is full of poetry. He even has a review of a poet named Martin Tupper. He excoriates him in a great passage. It's really great. But once you start reading Marx, you go back to Kant and you go back to Hegel. And Hegel was the big influence on me, even when I was 11 and 12 years old and started writing. Because Hegel's idea about the thesis, the antithesis, and then the synthesis becomes something new. So the thesis and the antithesis are opposites, but then when you meld them, it becomes something else. So even when I was 11 and 12, I used to print my little stories, and sometime I would draw a picture with it, and I'd mix it up, and then I would staple it, and I'd bring it to school, and some of the kids would read it. And so I was always playing with the form and the structure, even when I was 11 and 12 years old, with the idea that I could be opposite of whatever I was doing, because the opposite would meld with its opposite. And my dad, who was an alcoholic and drank a lot, the way for me to get over that in school and not be anxious and worried that, because I loved my father, he was a great man, I always worried that he would drive and get killed. And that was my fear. And so when I went to school, I was very anxious. I think until the 4th grade, I didn't pay attention. I don't think I heard anything. But the way I overcame that was with comedy, by being the class clown. And yet inside, you know, the old Pagliacci thing, you know, inside I was either crying or I was aware of life's deeper meanings, because a lot of my friends, and I watched Father Knows Best, I thought every family was happy except mine, or, you know, sane instead of crazy. And so comedy overcame that, but inside I was already reading stuff and I was thinking. So the structure of exit music is something that I've been working toward in an underground way, I think, all my life. When I started making little books as a kid, then my father bought me a typewriter. Oh God, the things I could do with a typewriter. I put pages in upside down. I put them in sideways. Then I would fold them and staple. I'd make little chapbooks out of them. So the structure is something that gradually grew. And a lot of my books I approach structurally because, again, I know I tell everybody go to Ralph's to get a chicken, don't know what you're going to do. But sometimes, in a Hegelian sense, you can see an end product, the book, and you could be creative working toward the book. So I've always had that notion. And sometimes it would occur to me, you know, I'm going to make a book that's going to be small. And so this book, All the Sad Angels, if I put it up against my face, as you can see, you know, it's much bigger than a normal book. And I thought, oh, I'll do something small. And the idea of a circus came to me. So a lot of the poems, All the Sad Angels, have the motif of a circus and the sad angel, not the happy angel, but the sad angel. Then one day, I don't know what, I thought, you know, I want to make a book that's tiny, like a flip book. Remember when you were a kid, you had a flip book and you'd flip it and it would be like Mickey Mouse doing something? Well, I thought, okay, I'm going to make a book that's really small. See this book here? See how thick it is? I didn't intend it to be that thick. I thought it was going to be about, I don't know, maybe that thick. But of course, once you start getting creative, things get out of hand. So I made a little book and I thought, well, what can I write for that book? Haiku. I'll write haiku. So I wrote a book of, I was going to only make 25 haiku, but it ended up being 50 of them. And I put 2 on each page. And then I decided to write an introduction. And I thought, you know, I wrote haiku when I was in 3rd grade. And then when I thought I would be a writer, I thought, oh, I'm not going to do haiku. That's for kids. I'm not going to do haiku anymore. I didn't do haiku for 60 years. And then I started to do a book called, you know, haiku. And I opened up with an essay called A Windswept Spirit. And it was supposed to be just maybe, you know, 2 or 3 pages. And it had a lot of little chapters in it. Let me show you how thick the opening essay is. That thick. 350 pages. And I actually counted the paragraphs, and the chapters are very short. So it's 201 chapters, 301 haiku, 201 chapters, and 601 paragraphs. And then finally one day, I was thinking about a deck of cards. And I thought, you know, I'm going to experiment with form. And I'm going to write something that's the size of a deck of cards, but it's a little bigger, as you can see. And I started experimenting, not just with the way they are in a box. I mean, they're separate cards, but look at all those letters, by the way. This is done way before, Adobe and Photoshop. Those are hand-drawn letters. And every page had a constellation of letters. Some of them would be upside down, and you'd have to read it this way, you'd have to read it that way. And there were 52 of them in a box. So sometimes the image of a finished form, and then you go to Ralph's to get a chicken and it grows into that, the structure can have all sorts of manifold expressions, and it can be really, really creative and really, really interesting. And one last word about structure, classical structure. Natalie, you mentioned the 3-act form, and that's what they tend to teach in screenwriting and stuff. But I want to remind you that there are more than 3-act forms. There's a 5-act form and there's a 2-act form. And the 2-act form is really unique. There's a movie now playing that I think Bill Nighy is nominated for Best Actor called Living. It's based on a movie that Akira Kurosawa did in 1949, a few years after the Second World War. And that movie is called Ikiru. I highly recommend you watch this movie. It's in black and white. Ikiru, Ikiru. That's the name of the main character, the one that Bill Nighy plays in the modern British version. It's got a 2-act form, and the 2nd act is revolutionary in how it is done. So not only do you have the 2-act form, you've got the 2nd act, which is kind of inverted within itself. It is a great film, one of Kurosawa's great films. Look at that one first, then see the Bill Nighy one, which is also in the 2-act form, but they treat it a little differently. So there's a show on TV right now called Poker Face with Leone, Natasha Leone something. It has a 2-act form, but done in a different way. The first half, they show you everything that happens and you think she's not there. Then the second half, they repeat the first half, but now she's there and she's observing everything that goes on and she's going to solve the murder. So that's a 2-act form. So the 3-act form is, not the only one. So when I did exit music, I realized it's really got 5 different structural parts, and I saw it as a hologram. Now, I don't know if any of you know the principle of the hologram, but if you can imagine it in a 2-dimensional negative that you would have for a photograph, the negative of a regular photograph, you hold it up and you see the photograph. If I cut a piece of that photograph out, I'm only going to see that piece. So if I cut the part out that has my eye, I'm just going to see my eye. But that's not how a holograph works. A holograph negative, every part of the negative contains the whole negative. So if I get a 3-hole punch and I punch a hole out of the negative of a hologram, that little circle is the whole picture, but from that point of view. So if I cut the hole from the bottom of the negative, I'm looking up at the picture. If I cut it from the middle of the negative, I'm looking straight ahead at the whole picture. And if I cut a little hole out of the top, I'm going to see that picture from the top view. So exit music is like a hologram. And that's why, Natalie, whether you read it straight through just the poems, straight through just looking at the pictures, straight through just looking at the text in the pictures, straight through just reading the red notes, or you read the whole thing straight through, every page has got all 5 levels on it, you're still going to get something. And to add to that, Natalie, as you said, if you read it backwards, it works as well. Because one summer when I was 16, I got bored with just reading one book after another. I read a lot of books. I decided one summer, how many books can I read at one time? And I ended up with 7 books. I would read one chapter from one from another, one from another. Then I go chapter 2, chapter 2. Eventually, as I was doing that, I thought this isn't challenging enough. And I got an 8th book that I decided to read backwards. It was a nonfiction book by Paul de Groot, who's a science writer, called Microbe Hunters, all about the scientists and their microscopes and things like that. So while I was reading 7 books forward simultaneously, I was reading this book backwards, 1 page at a time. So the whole holographic sense of exit music comes from my experience in all of that from the time I was 11 years old.
But why it's not like it's not like a chaos? Because we have a lot of books that looks like that, but when you read it, it's like broken pieces. They don't hold the story. So why here is like we still have the story, and it's not like a chaos.
I think because it's intentional.
It's like the hologram. If you cut a piece of it at the bottom, you'll still get the whole story, but from that point of view. And the other thing is, I've been doing that all my life. If I just have a normal book of poetry, I put the poems together in a way in which many themes, and this works with exit music, many themes work themselves through so that at the end of the book, all the themes come together. It's just more complicated with exit music because I've got paintings, signage, text in the paintings, poems, and the essays. But I've been doing that so long, I can do it. I can just do it. It's second nature to me.
Leads me to our next question, which is another question about structure, but I don't know that the structure is necessarily intentional or if it's something that I'm seeing in your work. And you talked about growing up and your father, and which I think is you talk about a lot in your poems, and I like. But I think about this other structure of the Bildungsroman, or the coming of age story. And as I read your book, in many ways, this book seems like a reverse Bildungsroman or a reverse coming of age, an unraveling of ages like an onion. And some of the poems, especially Take 5 in the beginning, seem to be from the perspective of a younger man. Some of the worries of somebody young, some are the worries of somebody in old age. And I want to know, was that intentional? Is this book a coming of old age? Is it a coming of death? Is it a reverse coming of age? Can you talk about your intention for that in the book and how you intended to represent the anticipation of the end of life and what you mean by that?
Well, obviously, a lot comes from my own personal experience, and a lot comes from my reading and experiencing other forms of art, plays, movies, all that stuff. And from the time I was very young, I was very old. The turmoil that went on in my family with my mother and father fighting, and my fear that my father would die, and being aware when I went to school that I had this darkness in me, I had this sadness in me. And when a lot of my father's friends in AA would come to the house, either for an intervention or maybe they were there to intervene someone else, or maybe just one of his friends would visit him, who was maybe not an alcoholic, just a friend from New York, from where he grew up. I could look at people and I could see inside of them. I remember his best friend from New York, Nat, came to visit him. And I remember them sitting there talking, and I looked at Nat, and Nat had brought me a little present. I was about 9 or 8. And I could look at him and I went, oh, he's a sad man. That's a very sad man. And I think my life is a little bit the reverse of the Bildungsroman, because I was born old. I was born seeing into or thinking I could see, maybe I didn't really, but in my mind, I could see people. I had a habit all my life that when I met new people, I could tell if someone was someone that I would that I would feel a kinship with, or if someone was just phony. I could tell that. And part of me learned to grow young. But again, I was young when I was young. I was the class clown. I was a fucking idiot. And so again, it's like two tracks going on at one time. The old part of me was becoming young as I grew, and the young part of me, the innocent part of me, was growing older. But then at the same time, both have been in me all my life. So there is no one linear progression like the coming of age story you're talking about, like Young Verda, or, those kind of novels. They're not linear. A lot is happening at one time. It's all happening at one time, like a hologram. I'm young getting old. I'm old getting young. I'm constantly being reborn, and I'm constantly dying. I remember when I had my heart operation, crows were coming to our house a lot, which I'd never seen before. They were washing their food out in our front fountain. And sometimes there'd be just one or two, but sometime I went out in the backyard one day and there must have been 20 of them, just 20 of them. And, a crow is a symbol of death. And this was when I was getting ready for my heart surgery. And then I remembered my haiku book, which I'd done a few years earlier. The crow is also a symbol of rebirth, because with every death, there's a rebirth. So all of a sudden, when I would see the crows, I'd get happy. I'd talk to them. Sometimes they wouldn't fly away. I'd say, hey guys, what are you all doing here? You having a meeting? I wasn't even invited. They'd look, they say the crow can recognize your face. And if you do harm to it, they'll come at you. So Alexandra, to answer your question, yeah, it is a reverse coming of age. And at the end of the book, in a way, I finally accept the luck of my life. The last poem is called The Lucky Penny. And the penny motif comes throughout the book. You'll see poems and text where the penny crops up. It's also an inside joke for those of you who've taken my classes about the prop for an image moment. You got to have a penny on the floor, The penny's always been, and my dad had a little coin collection, and sometimes I'd steal a nickel from it, and I felt guilty about that, but he had a penny thing. And pennies are very pretty when they're new. They're very coppery and very nice. But then there was the lead pennies in the war, those black ones. Oh, I love those. So the penny, for some reason, a penny for your thoughts, all that kind of thing. And at the end, there is a transformation where I give the penny away. I give the penny to you, the reader. I say, I've had as much luck as a person can have. I don't need it anymore. I give it to you. That's that last poem in the book that is in a painting. So it's a portrait of me. I think it's called Self-Portrait number 6. And the typed words are all around it. And I typed it literally. I mean, first draft, I lucked out on that one. And that's the last poem in the book. So it's a coming of age in reverse and a coming of death in reverse. Death in the beginning and rebirth at the end.
Thank you, Jack. That's why I think when I finished to read your book, I wanted to reread the introduction of the book.
If you finish the book and go back and read the introduction, it will explain everything.
Yes, but
and then you read it again.
Yeah, it's like explained me. It's like prepared me. First, it prepared me, and then I read the book. But after, I'm like, oh my God, I have to read it again because now I understand more. Now I get it.
Every time you go through it, because like Hansel and Gretel with the breadcrumbs, every piece has got a bunch of breadcrumbs in it. And the breadcrumbs, each one is a linear development because, literary criticism is something I started reading when I was in high school. you know, how you analyze a poem or a story, and it's got themes and how the themes are worked out. So I'm very conscious of that, even if I'm doing it subconsciously. With a single poem, I'm aware of it. And when you put a book together, I'm aware of it. And when you're doing something like exit music, which is complicated, there are crumbs all over that book. If you read one of the reviews of my book, he quotes a saying by Paul Valery that says, you know, every poet has a secret, and he leaves it up to the reader to find the secrets. And he said that he feels that there are secrets in my poems that even he, you know, the reviewer, doesn't fathom. So I'm not explaining everything to you today in this interview. And there are a lot of little crumbs that as you read, you go, oh, wait, they got all these things about God. He's got all these references to God. And what is all that about? There are so many little subtext there, form and chaos. There's one poem where I talk about my father coming home drunk and breaking a mirror in the bathroom. And when I went and looked at all the broken mirror in the sink, my face was all, you know, shards. It was like a cubist painting. So that became a motif for me in everything, that painting or a poem could be fragmented and still have the whole.
Thank you.
Read any poems from the book?
Yeah, I'm sorry, what?
Would you like to read any of the poems? Maybe Lucky Penny, or Self-Portrait number 2, the red notes.
You mean the one at the back of the book, or?
Yeah. So I feel like it goes with what you're saying. Sorry, it's off script of what we had planned, but I thought it relates.
Is that the title of the painting or the?
It's the title of the painting, but underneath you have these red notes that look like a poem.
On Self-Portrait number 2?
Mm-hmm.
What page is that on?
It's on page, if you go to the back of the book, it's the last page by your self-portrait.
Yeah, it's called, that's Self-Portrait. Oh, Self-Portrait number 2. Yeah, that's the one that, yeah, well, then I might as well show everybody this, because otherwise it won't make any sense. The opening piece of art in the book is called Last Self-Portrait. And you notice I got my hand over my face, so I'm hiding. But not completely. I can see through my fingers. And then there's little red notes or poems where I reference God. And God hides from us. I have a line in one of the red notes where I talk about questions that poetry doesn't answer questions. They just ask unanswerable questions, at the end of which is a question mark where God, inside the dot, hides from us all. So, yeah, this is an image of me hiding, but it crosses reference to God hiding from us. And I have a lot of red notes and poems in there where God is a character. There's one where God comes to me and says, I'm not finished creating the universe. Can you help me out? And I go, sure, what would you like? He says, well, why don't you draw a painting? And I go, well, couldn't I do a poem? And God says, oh, please give me a break. I've had it up to here with poets and poems. Just paint a picture of a tree. And of course, the tree is a theme that runs throughout the whole thing as well. I'm not going to go into that now. But at the very end of the book, after the Lucky Penny poem, the very last painting in the book is this one. And if you can see that, that's an oil, by the way, that's not watercolor. It's all black and white, except for a couple of places. Notice that my eyes are wide open. As a matter of fact, I patterned it a little bit after those Easter Island statues. No, I mean the Babylonian statues, where the characters had their eyes wide open, like they're looking at the flood of the end of the world. But at the end, my eyes are wide open. I'm showing my face. And after all the red notes that tell you things about art and everything, the last signage is, like love, like life in art, flying by the seat of your pants might just be the best approach. But approaches tell only half the story. In art, as in life, as in love, there's bound to be a crash landing sometime. But as Super Chicken said, any landing you can walk away from is a good landing. Keep walking, amigos. Don't be afraid to fly by the seat of your pants. So I'm telling the reader at the end, all this shit I wrote about art, forget it. Just fly by the seat of your pants. And when I say walking, I've got a whole bunch of poems in text in the paintings and poems about walking. As a matter of fact, on the copyright page, which has the signage for one of the poems, so it's on the copyright page, it says, art can nourish like a carrot. It can flutter like a leaf in the wind or skip like a stone across a lake. Art is the walking that makes the road, but is not the road, nor is it the destination. Let God make the carrot and the stone. Votre travail, mes amis, est de marcher, which in French means your job, my friends, is to walk. And so I've always felt in my life that I never ran, whatever setback or whatever trauma or whatever sadness or whatever loss or whatever grief or anything that I've had, just keep walking. And there's a lot of poems in there where I find myself in a strange country or going over a rickety bridge. And the theme of walking is in there. There's even one where I have a dream where I'm trying to cross a busy street. And my father told me always look both ways, and I didn't. And I ran, and then I got stuck in the middle, and the cars are going by, and I can never get to the other side. And then I have a poem about crossing trying to cross a rickety bridge, but the bridge was too rickety, so I waded into the stream, but I'm in the middle, and I'm not on the other side. I'm just in the middle. And again, that's to me the Hegelian thesis, antithesis. I'm neither on this side of the river or that side of the river. The synthesis is I'm in the middle, but I keep walking, but not across, but with the river, with the river, but in the middle. So there's just all these things that go together. I mean, I could talk about it forever. I'll shut up.
No, we like it. That's why we're here. And it's been, Natalie, do you want to ask the next question?
Yes, I have. And I don't know if it's good or bad, but it's more practical question. Exit Music is a pretty huge book. And to write a book, it's a big project. So you can't write a book in 1 week, no matter how you want it. So my practical question is, Jack, do you have any rules or some secrets how to write a book, or do you have your own theory how to write a book? Because book is a big project, and how to be inside of this project.
Well, first of all, two things. Whatever rules I give you, I tell you at the end of the book to forget about them and fly by the seat of your pants. So whatever I tell you, don't listen to me. Okay. The second thing is, in terms of the coming of age, what is the first poem in the book? The actual first poem in the book. And I'm 17 years old. And I have a date, and we're at a little nightclub where Dave Brubeck's quartet is playing, and they're playing one of their most famous songs called Take Five. And in that night, he probably did it every night, the saxophone player, when people are doing their solos, he says to Dave, I'll be right back. And, you think he's going to the bathroom. I don't know, maybe he was going to shoot up, who knows? But he goes out, so he's taking five in a way. And then he comes back. And at one point, the girl I was with, she was about my age, she said, let's go back to my place. And, it's kind of like an invitation. Let's go home, and we'll have sex. but I wanted to hear the rest of the song. I wanted to see how take 5 would end. And I say at the end of the poem that I would rather be here than, because going home moves my life forward. And I didn't want to go into the future. I wanted to take 5 forever, which is how the poem ends. I wanted to just be in that take 5, because to me, oh, you want me to read the poem?
Yeah, why not?
Okay. Dave Brubeck's Take 5 is playing in the background. I heard Brubeck play this in a little jazz place on Carrollton Avenue, which was not even in the quarter where you'd expect a jazz combo to be, but in some nondescript club near where the streetcars ran. I had a date with Barbara Heffer, red hair, Zoftic body, throaty laugh, and I was hoping the music and the watered down bourbon would do the trick. After 2 minutes into the song, the sax guy says, I got to go to the John, be right back. Either piss or smack, who knew? Brubeck riffed a while on the ivory, then the drummer covered for him for another minute or two. You have to scroll it, I can't see the rest. For another minute or two. And then Saxman comes back, grabs the axe, and jazz climbs back into your head, and more bourbon goes down your gullet. And Barbara says, let's go back to my place. And I say, after the song, I'm not sure, but had she walked out on me at that point, I might have stayed anyway, just to hear it all go down. Every time I hear that song, like now, 63 years later, sitting here in my book-filled study, trying to write another poem, another riff on the same theme of love and loss and death and grief, solitude and solidarity, riffs that never come out right. So you try again and again to get it right, though you never do. And then suddenly I'm back in that lounge bar on a nondescript, slow night. I've barely begun my life. I'm back in New Orleans, holding back every ounce of my future, just so as I could sit there and nurse that drink and hear that music and take 5 forever. So that's the opening poem of the book. And that's part of that reverse structure. But your question, Natalie, was about the idea of how did I get the idea for the book?
No, not the idea, but like how
do I make a
your
book?
writing routine? Yes,
Yeah.
how to write a big book.
Right. And I was saying, whatever I tell you, forget it, forget it.
Yeah, it was first rule.
Yeah. Again, I have this relationship with the product, whether I'm going to do a big book or a fat book or a thin book, and with going to Ralph's to get a chicken. And I have going to Ralph's to get a chicken means just not even knowing what I'm going to do. I have a signage on one of the paintings where it says, when I paint, I go to Ralph's to get a chicken. When I write, I go to the chicken and get the egg. So to me, I have no idea what I'm going to write before I write it. And that takes a long time to practice that. Just me telling you, go to Ralph's to get a chicken and start with nothing. Unless you've practiced that, all of you are going to have an idea in your head before you start. And if you do improvisational theater, you know that when you walk into the space of that page, it's the same thing. When you walk into that space of the stage, it's like the blank page. And the worst thing you can do in improvisational theater is to walk in with an idea, because the idea is your life preserver. You're so afraid that if you don't have an idea or a story or a theme or a plot, that you'll drown. And the only way you're going to learn that you won't drown is to go in the water without the fucking life preserver enough times to discover that if you start writing about nothing, you're going to end up with something. And if you end up with nothing, that's good. That means you didn't force anything, because you're going to have nothing a lot. They're not going to take the Nobel Prize away from you because you had a lot of somethings, but a couple of nothings. Oh, he had nothings. He had bad poems in his trash can. We're going to take the Nobel Prize away. If you don't fail as an artist, if you don't write shit as an artist, you're never going to write anything great. Goethe's famous saying, the good is the enemy of the best. If you're always trying to write something good, you'll succeed every time. But if you're willing to write shit, then you'll get shit sometimes. But sometimes you're going to get something great. And when you get something great, you're going to go, as you've all done. I know you've had this experience. You've written something that you didn't expect to write, and you go, oh my God, where'd that come from? Like, if I tell you where it comes from, you're going to mimic it. You don't know where it comes from. It comes from nothing, like the universe. Your second question is, how can I do it again? Well, I'm sorry, I don't got a formula for you. The formula is be open to writing shit. But can you do it? Well, it takes practice. You got to practice and practice and practice. And so I don't write a book. I just write a lot of shit. And as I'm going along, I look at it and I go, huh, this is about this. This is about that. Now I'm beginning to feel like I would if I were writing one story. Oh, I was just writing a lot of shit, but this is about the time my father came home drunk and I pushed him down and he hit his head on the floor and I thought I killed him. Oh, I didn't realize that. And then you start, just like with an improv, once you start, way leads on to way, and you never know if you're going to come back from that point. So does that sort of answer your question, Natalie?
Absolutely. And I want my students to listen it every day, your answer. I will listen it every day, like a mantra.
Well, I always like to say, I don't write books and I don't write poems. I write sentences. And sometimes I don't even write sentences. I write phrases. And sometimes I just put down words. What happens to it, I might discover after writing for 6 months, I got a book of poems here. I got an essay on literary criticism and the carnivalization of literature. And I got some short stories. I didn't know that's what I was doing, but now I see it because I'm in the middle of the improv. And now I see where we are. And one of the rules of improv is you never say no, but. If someone says, is that a chicken on your head? You don't go, no, it's a hat. You never do that in an improv. You always say yes, but. So if someone says, oh, is that a chicken on your head? I go, yeah, it is, but it's dead. It's been dead for about 6 years. Why don't you take it off? Well, I'm attached to it. Not physically, emotionally. We used to go together. The improv grows from nothing. So you never say no, but in an improv. You always say yes, and. So if someone throws something at you that you don't like and you don't want to go there because, I don't have any ideas about that, tough shit. You got to go, yeah, and, not but, yes, and blah, 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 blah. And then all of a sudden, the creative vista opens up to you. Now, I can write good, and sometimes I do, because somebody's paying me or I have a deadline, and then I'm not going to take a chance. I'm being paid. I got to deliver. Write a poem about a shoe. Okay, I'll write a poem about a shoe. You're paying me. I'll do it. I'm not a schmuck. I'm not going to, just whack off of it just because, you're paying me and the deadline is next week. So I got to get down to business. But if there's no deadline and I'm not getting paid, it's a free for all. I'm writing sentences. I don't know where I'm going to go. I don't know what it's going to look like. I don't know what it's going to be. Okay?
Yes.
That's one of the brilliant things about your teaching, and what I always think about is that you teach people, and we try to teach this to our students too. Like, what do you do when the pen is in your hand and you're facing the blank page? And how do you approach the blank page? And that's what method writing is. It's like, how
Well,
do
Nicana Parra, the Chilean Nobel Prize winning poet, said, "You can put anything you want on the page. The only problem is you have to improve on the blank page."
solid advice.
Yeah.
It made me think about teaching too, because when we teach, when we have a set theme or set plan, sometimes that goes out the window depending on what the students bring and what the genius of the moment, or the sort of eureka of the moment that happens. And sometimes things can go, it goes in favor of what the students bring, and plans can go awry. And when you go in with a set plan as a teacher, sometimes it can be too rigid, and you have to let it go to let the class emerge. And I think also, and you keep talking about improv, and a lot of the music, Dave Brubeck is very famous for his improv and jazz, and then you have all this music references in your book, especially in the lyric essays that run through, but not only. And I think I have a question about music as a motif. How is it woven throughout the book? How does it convey your beliefs about life? And how does this symbolism of music integrate with the framework that you teach about tonal dynamics and the metaphysical invisible form of voice as it plays into a work? Because that's kind of, we're talking about voice. So how does it connect? And if you want to talk about how you envision the music too.
Yeah, music's always been a big part of my life. On Sunday mornings, my parents would always go to the opera on Thursday nights. They had season tickets at the local auditorium in New Orleans. And on Sunday mornings, she would play a record that would be featuring one of the opera singers. She loved Giuseppe De Stefano. And sometime in the morning, I'd hear that opera music, and I'd be walking down the hall past their bedroom, and she would go, "Ah, Giuseppe De Stefano." She loved him. And Sunday mornings in my house were very dreary, because every morning, getting up for school, all the windows would be open, sunlight would be coming in. Saturday morning, same thing. I wasn't about to do homework on Saturday. I'd be out of the house playing baseball or football around the corner. But Sunday mornings, all the shades were drawn, and my mother's playing opera music, and I hated it. I hated it. It was always so, it was always so dreary. But for some reason, I grew up liking music in general. Music was always something that was there. And actually, sometime when I'm writing, I may not even yet know what I'm doing, but I might find some things and go, I'm going to make a little tentative something out of it. So before I got to Exit Music, the year before, I made a little chapbook, very little chapbook. And it's got some of my paintings in it. I Xeroxed it. Here's a painting on the cover, which it turns out I accidentally put it upside down. So if you look at it this way, you can see the faces in it, but this way it's upside down. And on the back, I have one of the self-portraits, okay? And it's just a little book, and I made only 50 copies of it, and it's called Save the Date. This is where Exit Music came from. So after my surgery, I thought, I think I'm going to get all my paintings. I started painting again when I was in college, but I have a lot of paintings I've done over the last 30, 40 years, hundreds of them. And I collected 50 that I thought would be, good. And I thought I'll do a book with 50 paintings. And I envisioned it just like this, a book just like that with the, poems in it, like that. And Baz was going to design it for me. And when he came up with the design with the signage, he said, "Why don't you put some signage there?" All of a sudden, it ballooned in my mind. And I thought, oh, so I could have that holistic thing going. Yeah, that'd be cool. And so I went on a tear, because every time I wrote another poem, I had to have another painting to fill the other side of the page. And anytime I made a painting, I had to write another poem to go with it. So in the last 3 or 4 months before the book came out, I painted another 50 paintings. Well, really about 80, but then I whittled it down to 50. So there's 100 paintings in the book. And I wrote about another 25 poems to fit the paintings. So there's about a total of 50, 60 poems in the book. And then one night I was watching television out back, and I have seen this a million times in the movie theater. You've seen it too, but you're not conscious of it. But at the end of these blockbuster movies, they have music that when you leave the theater, the music is playing. It is not what some people call exit music over the titles. That is not exit music. It's an incorrect definition. If you Google exit music, it's going to bring you to the Radiohead song, Exit Music for a Film. The movie's over. The lights come on. Everybody's getting up, and on the screen, in big white letters against a black background, you'll see the word exit music. And you're getting up, you're leaving the theater. It's innocuous music as you're leaving the theater. So the show is over, folks. Exit music is the music they play when you're being ushered into heaven or hell. The show is over. And one night I'm sitting out in our little guest house out back where I play poker and all that sort of stuff. And there's some movie, Tie Me Up, Tie Me Down, with Alejandro, whatever his name is. And because exit music is on the negative, you know, when they run those music, the guy at the TV station probably goes out and gets a sandwich. At the end, exit music comes on the screen. Just exit music. I'm looking for it because I took a picture of it, but I can't find it in my phone, so I don't know where it is. I used to have it here. Anyway, I'm sitting out back all alone, exit music. Now, I'm supposed to get up and leave, but I'm in my own home. What do I want to get up for? Maybe I'll change the channel. No, but I sat there like a fucking idiot, listening to this innocuous music and looking at the words exit music on the screen. And this is shortly after my heart surgery with the crows and me thinking about death, because even though I went into the operation very, you know, hey, let's do it. I'm good. In the back of your mind, you may not wake up. You never know. And as soon as you wake up after surgery in the OR, in the ICU, your first thought is, they should decorate the place. I'm alive, you know? And I'm sitting there looking at the words exit music, and I'm going, that's my book. Because maybe after this book is done, if I get it done, maybe I'll never do another book again. Maybe this is the exit music to all my other books. And so the music theme began to crawl into the poems and the paintings. But more important, I began to see the structure of the book in musical form. So if you listen to a symphony or a concerto, there's movements, you know, 3 or 4 movements. Now, some of Beethoven's last string quartets have 6, but generally there's 3 or there's 4. And I wrote these 3 essays. The first one is called Exit Music, in which I talk about the Radiohead song, but I also talk about Leonard Cohen's song, Hallelujah. Then the second essay is called Final Movement, where I do a thing on final movement. And we went to see a Bruckner symphony, and the woman looked like she died, and they're ushering her up to heaven. You have to read the essay. It's really funny. And then coda. You know, coda is the little, it comes from a Latin word or something that means a tail. It's like a little tail. So I wrote those 3 essays all the way across. And I began to see the musical theme, not only in some of the poems I'd written subconsciously, but I began to consciously have the music theme in it. But those three essays, again, you could read those three essays across the board. I'm not going to read the essay, but just a quick, touch base on it. Exit music begins talking about the Leonard Cohen song. Well, I heard there was a secret chord that David played that pleased the Lord, but you don't really care for music, do you? Well, it goes like this: the fourth, the fifth, the minor fall, the major lift, the baffled king composing, hallelujah, 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 hallelujah. So that whole opening essay of the book, called Exit Music, David's chord was really not a chord. It was a progression that lifted the harmony. It lifts it, fourth, fifth, minor fall, major lift. It lifts the harmony out of a deceptive resolution, because you're expecting a resolution, but it's deceptive. And that deceptive resolution is oscillating. Oh, here we go, Hegel again, thesis, antithesis. It's oscillating between hopelessness and hope, reminding us that every exit is another opening. Every coda is another progression out of tonal ambiguity. And that tonal ambiguity, it's neither happy nor sad. That's why it drives me crazy when people say, oh, it's a sad poem. No, it's not sad, it's not happy. It's something in between. And that tonal ambiguity, which is not happy nor sad, is lost. It's that feeling you have when you're neither hopeful or neither hopeless. You're just kind of lost in the middle. But that's the minor fall. The fourth, the fifth, the minor fall, the major lift. The major lift that pushes you forward to the next chord, and that's the chord that pulls you home. So the whole song is really the secret chord, not just a chord. Well, I heard there was a secret chord that David played and it pleased the Lord, but you don't really care for music, do you? Well, it goes like this: the fourth, that's the fourth chord of the major scale. The fourth, the fifth, we're going up, da, da, the fourth, the fifth, the minor fall, oh, the fall, the hopeless, the law, minor fall, the major lift. But we're in suspension, the major lift, where do we go there? One more. The baffled king compose. Now we're at the F. Composing, hallelujah. And then he resolves it. Hallelujah, 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 hallelujah. Now we're going to get to the tonic. Hallelujah. So that's the opening thing on Exit Music. And then, after a while, we get to the essay on the final movement. And the final movement is that whole story about me seeing the Bruckner Symphony and a woman behind the orchestra in the high seats that went all the way up to the ceiling. There's a woman in those few rows, and gradually she starts closing her eyes and her body starts slumping, and she begins to slump down in a seat and go lower and lower and lower. Now you're watching the orchestra, and behind them, you're seeing a woman up there in the balcony, right where the ceiling is, slumping further and further and further down. And eventually, all eyes are on her, and no one's listening or watching the orchestra. And the conductor, he's just conducting away. And finally, a woman screams, and the next thing you know, there's some guy's appearing with a stethoscope. He must be the house doctor, and they're helping her up, and they're carrying her up the stairs to the door that exits that door is right by the ceiling. And they carry her through that door. And the orchestra stops playing. And Bruckner's music at the end, it is not the finale that you get in a final movement. Dun, 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 dun. Bruckner goes into this spiritual realm where in his mind, he is ascending into heaven, because Bruckner was a very simple man, but he wrote very spiritually. Nobody understood his music. But it's not about where he's going. It's about who's going to meet me when I get there. It's so beautiful. And they usher this woman through this door and she leaves. And then Dudamel walks off, and then there's a little pause, and then he comes back again and he says, just want to tell you, ladies and gentlemen, the woman is fine. She's doing well. And with your permission, we will continue with the finale. And he taps this thing and he says to the, bar number 76, and then they start to play that finale again. And as they're playing it, in my mind, I'm going, they're going to get to a certain point and someone else is going to slump and they're going to carry them out. And then they're going to do it again and then they're going to carry someone else out. And then I sat there thinking, when are they going to come for me? When will it be my turn? So when we saw that ending, it was a very somber but spiritual ending. And the final movement of a symphony or concerto, it doesn't have to be all that big thing with the trombones, but either way, it's an assertion of aliveness, even though you are conscious in your life that you were wounded. But you're still there. You're still here. And that goes to Heidegger and some of the philosophy that's in exit music, where I do things with Heidegger, who talks about Dasein, there, being, you're there. He means there, meaning here.
Fully present.
So whether the music is spiritual or whether it's rousing, you're reminded that even though you're conscious in your life of being wounded, we are still here. We are brought home. Musical themes that seem to go nowhere, all of a sudden at the end, they seem to magically come together. So if you're reading exit music and you go this and that, and well, what's he writing about? It's going here, it's going there, it's going, painting, there's a signage, blah, blah, blah. By the end, it all coheres if you're patient enough to wait.
I think
that's the final moment.
Isn't it?
And then we get to the coda. We get to the essay on the coda. Now the coda is not exit music. Remember, exit music is even after the coda, although it could be.
I want to interrupt you very briefly to say, but I had a thought, it's like the full catastrophe of living. I think that's
I'm sorry, you had what?
The full it's like you're talking about what Katsantzakis, I think it's Nikos Katsantzakis that says it's the full catastrophe of living.
Yes.
This idea
of you embrace the full capacity of living.
Catastrophe.
And Lisa, you know this, that poem about me knocking my father down. And at the end, you remember what the last line of that whole poem was? What was it? Can you unmute? Well, I'll do it. It says, I stayed. In other words, the full catastrophe, I stayed. I'm still here. And then when you get to the coda, now, and again, this is something that Marx from Hegel, before his economic and theories, in his philosophical and social manuscript, philosophical and something manuscripts, Marx is really a poet, and he's talking about the human soul changing. And so I got that even then, that it's about humanity, about our souls, and about who we are. And that even though I was very academically trained, poetry had to be personal. That if you didn't make it personal, it was nothing. So what is the coda? The coda leads us back to ourselves. It's kind of a glimpse of home after your long journey home. And a coda can consist of little short cadences, or it could be a longer cadence. It can leave you hanging in suspense, as if to imply that there's more to come. The best is going to come. And then they have the interrupted cadence. There's no resolution to the harmonic structure. It could be a cadenza, as Groucho Marx says, no matter how you've shortened or condensed it, I'm against it. So a cadenza can be a coda. A famous coda cadenza is na 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 na. Hey Jude, na, and that goes on and on and on and on, and it never really ends. So that's called the interrupted cadenza or cadence. But what it suggests is that this isn't the end. This is the new beginning. This is the first movement of the next song. This is not even the end. It's the beginning of the next song. And Beethoven did that. Some of the codas of his string quartets became the beginning of his next string quartet. You could say, like, one man's outro is another man's intro. And folks, codas lurk everywhere in your life. Codas come to you every day, in life and in art and in love. They're everywhere. And if you read the last few words of the coda essay, I'm just going to read the last few words of the coda. Can I do that? Do we have a second?
Oh, yeah, we have. And,
all right,
and
here's the last few words of the coda essay. Codas might be mistaken for exit music, but when idly leaving the movie theater, it's best not to dwell too long on what you saw. It's more like a codetta, a little coda, which is a brief conclusion, a dominant tonic cadence at the end of the exposition that may be repeated several times for emphasis. If you find yourself in the midst of a coda, in life or in art, slow it down. Add a few more notes, a subdominant theme. Circle back to the beginning. Go back as far as you can remember, where the music started, when those first few notes suggested all the possibilities that a musical composition could offer, when you first put pen to paper and learned to love the mere appearance of all that ink. And if you turn the page and you get to the very last prose piece in the book, it's called Ink. And it's all about me first putting pen to paper and writing and deciding that I was going to be a writer. And then you turn the page again, and then you get to the last painting in the book, the self-portrait, which is all the text about the lucky penny. And then you get to the last page, which is that painting with my eyes wide open, no longer depending on a lucky penny, depending on the luck inside of me. So those are the three essays and the progression of the music in the whole book, Alexandra. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, it does. And I have another question that relates to that. And because of the different impressions I get from each of the songs, and as we go through the book, it starts, the first essays talk about really somber music, like exit music for a film and the Radiohead, and then Hallelujah, Leonard Cohen, and then it goes to all this composer and the lady almost dying, and the intensity of that moment, which I just experienced a similar moment, by the way, in the park, in the basketball court. Someone had an aneurysm and fell, and it was all the kids were playing, and it was like that. It was like it was horrible, but then they lifted him, and then they went, and it was like a symphony. But then there's this other thing, like these codas, these cadenzas, these happy songs, like you referenced, like the outro of Freebird by Leonard Skinner, and all these really, like, songs, the Hey Jude ending. So my question to you is, and maybe you partially answered this already, but which one do you prefer? Do you want to go out with exit music, or do you want to go out like a coda, like a cadenza? And which is the better way?
Well, first of all, my whole life has been a coda and a cadenza. I'm always music. Everything to me is music. Remember, I said codas lurk everywhere in our lives. How do I want to go out? Well, I don't want to go out. I want to go in. I want to go into myself. I want to go in. And I don't make a, because at the end on the essay on coda, I seem to imply that the coda could be the intro or the outro. And again, we're back to Hegel and the thesis and the antithesis and the synthesis. Going out is the synthesis. And from that synthesis, according to Hegel, comes its own antithesis and then merges in another synthesis. So the universe is being created again and again and again. And so is life.
You're creating a universe within all of your students as well, who are creating a universe within their students.
That's a nice way to think of it.
I thought of that afterwards when we had that really good conversation that we didn't film, but we should have. I thought about that all day and how your work already lives on in ours, and ours lives on with our students, and all of our, there's this beautiful relationship.
Yeah, I would like to think that I'm not teaching my students to write, but I'm teaching them to sing.
Yeah.
I have two friends, and they're both musically inclined. And one's from Philadelphia, and the other also lives in LA, but across the hills. When we're together, we were in a cafe one time, but we've done this in other places, where you're close to the railroad tracks. And every once in a while, you're sitting in a cafe having coffee, and a train might go by nearby. And as a train goes by, you hear, ooh. And we just break into harmony with the train. So we're in a cafe, and everybody's hearing, ooh. And then one of us go, da. And it goes, oh, we'll all harmonize with the sound of the train. So it's like a quartet, and we get a kick out of that. So we'll break into song a lot depending on what's going on. We're crazy about that. But I like to think I'm teaching my students to sing, not just to write, but to sing. And I think I give music as one of my exercises, because I want people to listen to music and listen to the tonality and the harmony, and not the words, but the music of it. Because sometimes when I'm writing, I'm really thinking about musical, tonal dynamic, but what is the tone? I told you this before, and I've said it to some of my students, but I'll say it again. When Beethoven took my class, he was good. He was very talented. You should have heard him play chopsticks on the piano. It was marvelous. But he progressed in my classes, did well. And then he started working on a symphony, and he comes in with the beginning of his symphony, because, you can only, in my class, you can't go over 500 notes. So this is how his symphony began. Da 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 da. 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 I said, Ludwig, give me a break. With all the da 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 da, getting a little boring. You want to use tonal dynamics. Straight talk, Lost World, Redden Song, Absence of Feel. He said, well, what should I do after? I said, give the da 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 2 bars, and then give me a little straight talk, a little straight talk, and then go back down. So he rewrote it, and he came to class, and it was his turn. And then this is how the final form. Da 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 da. Da 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 da. Straight talk. Ba da da dum, ba da da dum, ba da da dum. Ba da da dum, ba da da dum, ba da da dum. Ba da da dum, ba da da dum, ba-da-da-dum, bum, ba, da-da-da-da. So Beethoven learned tonal dynamics. So I am teaching music in the writing to pay attention, not to your story, which we all know is what, everybody? Boring.
Boring.
Because if you just tell your story, it's going to be da 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 da. Wake me up when it's over. Think music. So you're telling your story, but think tonal dynamics. Change the tone. Do a little straight talk. Do a little red and sung. Do third bass teeth and mouths. Image moment. Even massaging a transformation line is a tonal change. You could be in the head voice, then the reporting voice, and then you massage the transformation line. Dun, 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 da. Dun, 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 da. Ba-da-da-dum, ba-da-dum, ba-da-dum. So yeah, music, music, music. The songs that I reference in Exit Music may be referenced in a deep voice. See, the songs are just me referencing things. They're not necessarily me analyzing the song. I'm just letting you know that music is good, you know.
It's there for you. It's part of your,
Yeah.
That's beautiful.
I do a whole sequence in some of my classes where we only focus on drum solos at the beginning of a song. You know, just a drum solo. Man, if you listen to Ginger Baker, or listen to Ringo's drum solo that occurs toward the end of Golden Slippers. It's great. It's a really great drum solo. So sometime I'll just have people, I'll give them drum solos, and then they have to write something in that drum solo.
That's beautiful. Natalie, you have a few more questions. Are you?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. And they're very close about what you're talking, Jack, because for me, exit music and all what you do in method writing, it's about personality. It's how to be not a writer, but how to be a person, write like a person. That's what I heard on your class in 2018. And I know that we're all scared to be who we are. We like have that fear about our authenticity. And my question is, how can we exercise or learn that courage to feel and create our own art and don't have that fear of our authenticity?
Well, to quote my acting teacher, he would say, don't be an actor on stage, be a poison. You know, and you have no idea how hard that is. If you've ever performed in front of people or a camera, you know, that camera eye is coming right at you. It's very hard to be real because what we all want to do is act.
The same in writing.
The same in everything, in everything. Being a poison is the hardest thing there is. Being authentic. I mean, that goes back to Heidegger in his book Being in Time, to be authentic. And I don't have a formula for that, but I knew at a very early age when I could look at people and see them, and when I would be covering up my own grief and loss and not wanting to admit that my father drank when everybody I knew, you know, all the Jewish families. I mean, you know, in my world, you never heard of a Jewish alcoholic. You know, the Jews would drink the kosher wine at Passover, but that was about it. I think that is the tonic note. Hallelujah. And you're all waiting for ya. Whenever you listen to music, dun, 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 dun. Music ends on the tonic note. The tonic note resolves everything. It makes you feel whole again. And being authentic is like that tonic note. And God knows I'm not authentic all the time. I might be authentic once in a while, and I consider that a minor victory. When I'm writing and acting, that is what we strive for. That's what actors and writers and artists strive for. That if in life we can't be authentic, can you be authentic in your art? Life is bigger than art, way bigger than art. So if you want to practice being authentic in your life, practice it in art first, because it's a smaller ring. How to find the words that take you deep. I came up with the transformation line, but eventually you don't need the transformation line. You just need to know where it is in your body and come from that place in your body. And I don't have like a rule for it, but you used a certain word, Natalie. You said, if I remember correctly, how do you learn or get the courage to feel and create in your own art? And use the word courage.
Yeah.
I'm not a fan of that word courage. I think it's something we are told early, just like when I was a little boy drawing in art class in second grade. And again, it's one of the red notes in the book where the teacher says, why don't you paint a tree? And I go, that is a tree. And so she keeps wanting me to paint a tree. And I think I'm painting a tree. And so even art teachers, they're trying to mold you. They're trying to make you be something. And so the word courage is what you have to be authentic. But when I think of courage, I think of a guy with a rifle on a battlefield. I think of a guy in a fireman's outfit rushing into a burning building to save a child. I think of someone jumping into a river to save someone from drowning. Well, what am I going to do? Walk around looking for a car I can jump in front of and show I have courage? I don't like the word courage. So I would like to use a different word, or I would like to give a definition of what I think courage really is. And you can write this down. You can put quotes around it. You can get it bronzed, and you can put it above your writing desk. Because if there's anything you want to remind yourself when you're writing, if in the back of your head someone's telling you, have courage. When my father died, I just thought of this. I was in Italy and I got the phone call from the father of the boy I was traveling with. We were, 19. He said, son, I have bad news. I said, what? He said, you're the man in the family now. The man in the family now. I knew what he meant. I knew my father had died. But of course I went, I don't understand. It was long distance, man. I don't understand. Fuck, I understood. My father died. This man that I was 19 or end of 18, who had lived in the streets, who'd lived in hobo jungles. He was a man who'd come up by his bootstraps from nothing, quit school in 8th grade so he could get a job and help the family. I loved my father. He was the greatest man I knew. He read everything. He read Marx. He inculcated in me this desire to help others, to have this social sense of we're all in it together. And he was gone. And whenever I asked him, Dad, why do you drink? He said, I'll tell you when you're older. I would ask that when I was 12. When I was 14, I'll tell you when you're older. When I was 16, I'll tell you when you're older. When I was 19, I'll tell you when you're older. And then he died. I don't understand. You're the man in the family now. Your father has died. And I had to go home. And there was a man at the desk that I had to tell. We were checking out of the hotel to get in a bus. I said, we've got to go home, got to go to the airport. My father died. And I'll never forget this. The guy didn't know me from Adam. He reached his hand across the desk and he took my hand and he said, courage. I'll never forget that. Courage. Where did he get? I mean, I guess that's something he said. I don't know. Those words stayed with me for years and years and years.
Well,
What
Greek
is
people say
courage? What
that
is
when
courage?
something is difficult, we say coraggio, when you have to go do something really hard.
Yeah, hard and
Courage,
physical.
coraggio, go with
Right.
courage.
Coraggio. And here's my definition. And you're going to write it down and you're going to put it above your writing desks. Courage is the capacity to give, unquote. It's not about physical strength and jumping into a river. It's your capacity, your capacity. I didn't say how much you give. I said, what is your capacity to give? That's it. Whether it's with words or with another human being in front of you or to a society, what is your capacity to give? That is your coraggio IQ. So that's my answer, Natalie.
Thank you, Jack. It's brilliant. The capacity to give. I've never looked at this word like this. Thank you. Alexandra, do we have time for one more question, or we will?
Yeah, time for two more, I think.
Good. Okay, so one more practical question. Jack, I know that you have like 6-8 classes per week and you teach 120, 160 students per week. Also, you write articles and you work on how many books right now? Like 2-3 books at the same time?
I got my James Joyce book. I got my book of essays, and I'm actually started a fourth book. It's on the carnivalization of literature.
4 books. So my simple question is, how do you manage all this? I mean, you are like, we're all complaining about time and that like we don't have enough of it. And how as a writer and a teacher, a husband and an artist, and you find time for paintings also. How do you organize yourself? Like, I need that immortal secret.
Well, if I really organize myself, those 4 books would be written already, and I'd be working on another 4. So I'm not as productive as I would like to be. There are many artists and writers who are way more productive than me. I'm doing my best. I don't have an organized kind of plan. But I remember when I started reading when I was 11 years old, I read nothing but comic books, and my dad brought home something he thought a book that I would read, and it was a Perry Mason murder mystery by Earl Stanley Gardner. And Earl Stanley Gardner, I read all his books. Must have been 50 of them. I then read about him, and it turns out that he wrote books under 2-3 other pen names. He wrote a book about Donald Lamb and Bertha Cool, she was a very large woman detective, and Donald Lamb was a lawyer who had been disbarred, and they had a detective agency. So he wrote not just the Perry Mason books, he wrote Donald Lamb and Bertha Cool. He wrote another series of books in third person. And he had 3 secretaries that he would dictate to. He always had a straw hat on. He would go from one room to another in the course of a day and dictate a chapter from one book. And then she would, of course, take it down and then type it up. Then he would go to another and then another. And I always thought that was really cool. I thought that was pretty cool. And then, of course, when I was reading the books, 7 books one summer at the same time, and then I added an 8th where I read backwards, I just thought it was cool to be doing more than one thing at one time. But I'm not doing more than one book at one time because I think it's cool. I write sentences, and sentences lead to paragraphs, and paragraphs lead to poems, or they lead to stories or a novel or an essay. And sometimes I write a bunch of stuff and I go, this is really about Michael Bakhtin and the carnivalization of literature. Oh, and some of this stuff, shit, I'm doing a thing on James Joyce here. Oh, man, I thought this was going to be 5 pages, but it's 80 pages already, and I can see it's a book. It's now 500 pages. So in the course of me just being creative in writing, kind of things bloom out. It's kind of like when you're walking down the sidewalk. You ever walk down a sidewalk that's paved and you notice a little piece of grass is sticking up between in the little crack? I'm not talking about the formal crack. I'm just saying the pavement's cracked a little bit, and there comes a piece of grass.
I love that. That's my favorite.
And to me, that's like a miracle. So that's what it is. They're just all these little pieces of grass coming up, and if you don't cut it, the grass becomes a tree. And then you bring it to the printer and you print it, and you got a book.
Wow, if you don't cut it, it's very.
So I don't have a, it's not like I'm writing all the time. I do a lot of things that are enjoyable, like reading a book. That was a joke. No, I tend to be a creative person. Everything. I said this in class one time. Everything is the book, but not everything has to go in the book. Well, not only is everything is the book, everything is a book. And so I could be doing the most inane thing, and I'll see something in it, and I'll go, "Oh, that's interesting. Oh, that'd be." And then later on, it goes into my subconscious, and I might be writing, and I go, "Oh, that's another book." So it's grass sprouting through the cracks in the sidewalk. You don't have to have an organization. You don't have to have a plan. If you think creatively, if you are creative in your life being, everything is a book. Everything. You just got to notice the grass. A lot of us walk and we don't notice the grass coming up through the sidewalk, but it's there. Grass is coming up all around you. Codas lurk everywhere, and so do the grass from the earth shooting up through the concrete of your daily life.
That's like creativity.
Quote. Yeah.
Beautiful. I feel like there's another question that relates to that, and to dovetail on what Natalie's saying is there's this side, you have these liner notes or these red notes that Natalie coined so well, and she by calling them red notes, and they're on the side of paintings, and they're kind of like a poem in themselves, or they're their own, they can be read as their own narrative, but they're sprinkled around, and they talk about, it seems to be that you're talking about ways of being an artist, or ways of seeing art and making art, and especially things that a teacher might have told you. And I'm thinking about, damaging little beliefs that we internalize as artists. And I think that's a lot of the work that you do in method writing, is you help people undo those knots creatively and psychically, so they can not believe the lies that people told them about art. Can you speak to that in the book and in your life and your practice as an artist and as a teaching artist?
Well, the hardest thing I had to do was when I painted 50 more paintings and realized I had to write 50 more little red notes. And I'm telling you, I had already planned that the notes would be about art. There wouldn't be poems, they'd just be about art. And man, there were some days I said, well, okay, if I do 5 a day, it'll take me 10 days and I can get them all done. But some of them are about general things about art, but some of them are thematic about, like painting. One of the things about art that I wrote, which is on page 89 in your hymnal, it says, you can either take out the trash or paint it. When you can't tell the difference, call it art. So that's, me being a little funny. And then there's a kind of I don't know, a rebellious streak in me that almost defies all the rules. It says, and this is on page 49 of your hymnal, strive to make art useless. One of the things I really, and I do it too, okay? I'm guilty of it, all right? I confess. We need a painting to go over the sofa. You know, you're looking for a color scheme, or you're looking for something that will fit over the sofa. And so my first thing is strive to make art useless. Like if it fits any practical thing, it's, you know, don't do it. When you're creating art, it should be useless. The more useless it is, the better. Strip it of purpose. Damage anything of utility. Erase all pertinent data. If it has a handle, break it off. Even a blank canvas has purpose. Tear it up. Basically, you're fucked even before you start. If you had any brains, you'd become a doctor or sell vacuum cleaners door to door. Save yourself before it's too late. So I'm saying even a blank canvas has purpose. Get rid of it. So then I have another one, which is a kind of, I don't know what to call it. It's on page 64 of your hymnal. I think it's kind of a spiritual consolation to all of you. And here's what it says. Again, a red note. Say anything you want, art will contradict it. Do anything you want, art will conceal it. Think anything you want, art will reveal it. Love anyone you want, art will heal it. So that's kind of a, you know, consolatory thing. Then I have one that is a consolation of a different type, because everybody gets writer's block, you know. They don't know what to write, or they feel like everything they've written lately is not good or shit or something. Well, I hope this gives you a little hope here. Wait, page 108 in your hymnal. Here it is. Make art when you're hot. When you're not hot, make art until you get hot. So it says, if you want to get hot because you've not been hot, make art. Even if it's shitty, the way to get hot is to make more art. And then there's the last thing. Well, there's a few more, but I'm only going to do one more. On page 144 of your hymnal, I'm reminding all of you, don't have such chutzpah. Chutzpah is an Irish word which means nerve. You know, like, oh, you have some nerve coming here after you divorced your wife. And, you know, chutzpah is like, you know, who do you think you are? This one is kind of a, it diminishes the chutzpah you have that you think you are the maker of your art. And sometimes you're just the bringer forth. What Robert Browning called the maker's sea. You're a maker. You're not making art. You're just a maker. You're making a shoe. And so here's what the signage says. To begin the creative process, you must have passion. Can you throw your body into infinite space? Can you make a fool of yourself while wearing a tuxedo? Can you dance the tango barefoot? The work of art that lives inside of you, waiting to be born into this world, begs your passion to retrieve it. Birth is a bloody act. Algebra won't help you. So give birth from your passion. Don't worry about the finished product.
From your pain too, from the wound inside of you.
Everything. And the thing about damaging, the very first signage in the book, or if not the very first, one of the first, is the one where my art teacher, when I was in second grade, was already squelching me. I don't know if you all heard about this thing about this man whose son painted his fingernails, and the teacher said, no, only girls do that. And he made a video that went viral where he let his son paint his fingernails, and he spoke to the teacher, very friendly, and said, his son is expressing himself. Let him express himself. So here I am expressing myself, and already a teacher is saying, you know, that's not a straight line, or you're not, you know. So here's the little quote. I read part of it before. The first thing I painted was a house with smoke coming out of the chimney. The art teacher said it looked like a tree. And I have a whole bunch of stuff on tree. The art teacher said it looked like a tree. So I painted a tree with a bird on a branch chirping. Then the art teacher said it looked like a house. So I painted a picture of my father sitting at the kitchen table eating a bagel. The art teacher said, "That's a good tree." I said, "Yes, it's a summer tree. In the fall, all the leaves will be gone." So she keeps telling me that I have to paint what I'm painting. They have to be a tree. So then on page 155, and by the way, I'm only doing a couple of these, but there's a whole bunch of them throughout the book, the theme of the tree. On page 155, I have a picture. No, it's a quote. It's another red note. It says, "My art teacher in third grade said, 'Why don't you paint a tree?' This is a tree," I said. So I'm reiterating that. Then on page 165, I have this painting. Can you all see it? I'll hold it up. Can you all see it?
Yeah,
What is that, everybody?
tree.
It's a tree. Now, elsewhere in the book, I have a joke where I paint something and underneath I say, "This is not a pipe." You know, the Magritte thing, or "This is a pipe." So I got a tree here, right? Right? You know what the title of it is? No, I mean, can you see what's at the bottom? Can you read that?
This is not a tree.
This is not a tree. So it's like Marguerite says, "This is not a pipe." Underneath, I got, "This is not a tree." And here's the signage that goes with that. Okay. Making art is a break-in. Don't ring the doorbell, smash a fucking window. Making art is a breakthrough. Don't knock politely, kick the door down. Sometimes making art is a breakup. Don't yell up to your lover waiting for you in that third floor window, "Hey, I've got a ladder, I'm coming up." Better to crash through the roof as you fall from a plane without a parachute. Fall into the arms of art unannounced. So I think that covers your question about how when we're young, we are always made to think that if we're going to write a book, it's got to be a certain way. What's the structure of the novel? What's the structure of the short story? Is it 3-act structure? So many times people in my class go, "I don't know how to write a novel." I go, "Don't write a novel, just write a lot of shit." I mean, it'll come to you. The form will come to you. There are so many different forms. Look at Julio Cortázar's novel, Hopscotch.
Oh, I love that book.
The chapters are numbered 7, 22, 18, 67, 45. So you could read the whole book either by the numbers or in the way they are in the book. There is no structure to a novel. All of you think you've got to have some kind of structure. All that is your teachers telling you, "Why don't you paint a tree?" And you go, "Well, this is a tree." You go, "Oh, paint a house." "No, this is a tree." "Oh, you can't do that." So I worry how so many of you worry about, does it conform to what a novel should be? Does it conform to what a memoir should be? Is this a short story, or what, is this a poem? Are you allowed to say this in a poem? Can you do this in a poem?
Yeah, I had
That's your fourth grade teacher telling you what you're allowed to do.
this man
And
who
your
had a poem.
parents telling you you're not allowed to be sad. And it's
Yeah.
your friends worrying about your mental health.
Right.
That's why I love your essay about Proust. And I recommend all my students to read this essay because we translated it even in Ukrainian, because it's about that.
Right.
It's-
Proust didn't know what he was doing till he was halfway through.
You have this great last line, or the last liner note, or one towards the end. It's not the last one, but it's towards the end on 192 under mirrored image. And you say, "When the judges assemble to judge your art, while they are deciding whether it's good or bad, make more art behind their backs. Stay one step ahead of your judges."
Stay ahead of your judges, because as soon as they get to you, they're going to shut you down. Every damn one of them. Your friends, your mother, your lover. Everybody wants you to look good. Oh, that poem is too sad. Oh, you can't talk about that. Everybody wants you to look good. Make a tree, because if you make a tree, Jackie, that's what they call me in, second grade. My father hated it. Make a tree, Jackie, so when your parents come to visit, I can show them that I'm a good art teacher. She doesn't give a shit about me. She doesn't care about my artistic impulse. Just make them happy. Make your mother happy. Make your family happy. Make your lover happy. Make your husband, make your wife, make your friends happy. Can't tell you how many times I've heard people say, I want to read a poem, but it's sad. I say to them, could we have that as a 500-word essay on how sad it is so that we can approve of it? What are you telling me it's sad for? What, do you think I got a problem with sadness? You think I don't know sadness? You think I'm afraid of sadness? You think I'll die if it's sad? You think I'll cry if it's sad? Don't make me sad. And what do people pay for? What do they pay for when they go to the movies? They pay for the ticket and a box of Kleenex, because that's what they want when they go into the darkened theater.
Right.
That's what they want from art. But when it's you, they don't want you to be sad.
Yeah, that's a beautiful point. I think I had a student come to me with a poem that was just, it like what made me want to cry. And he said, is this a poem? I don't know. And I was like, yes, it is. Of course it is. And I think you're right about that, Jack, you've lived a life of art. You've taught all of us so much about art, and this book is amazing, and you're amazing, and you're a treasure. I'm really glad that we were able to spend these last 2 hours with you. And Natalie, you're amazing too. Thank you for bringing me in and for having this idea to host this reading and to putting this together, because it's very meaningful. We were so nervous in the beginning, but it flowed so naturally as it went. It's just like a conversation. And I feel like we carry all of your ideas about art with us, and we strive to do this to be not to be Oprah-esque, but to be our best selves, in our art, and to be our true selves. And that's so hard. You're right. It's like a battle we do every day. So thank you so much. And
you're welcome. I appreciate you and Natalie arranging this. And of course, I can't tell you how much I appreciate the people that signed on to hear all this. And I just want to remind you that there's an old saying. They say a teacher teaches the hardest what they have yet to learn themselves. So everything I've said today are things I struggle with continually. I'm struggling to be a person and to make art, and there are a few copies of my book left. There was only 75 copies printed. They're expensive because of how they were printed, but there's a few copies left.
we'll send you a link to everyone who signed up for the Zoom, and we'll also post it in our YouTube live stream once we have it.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Your questions, by the way, were great.
Good.
Great
Thank
questions.
you. Thank you, everyone. And Jack, we are waiting for your next book.
I am too.
Oh, thank you so much. Thank you so much. Because method writing changed my life, and it continues to change my life every day. And this book, for me, is like a symbol of this process. To be brave, to make my own art, to write a shit. And yes, and this book, it's like
Well, I only have one thing to say in closing, and that is na 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 na. Hey Judy, 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 Judy. Na 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 na. Hey Judy, 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 yeah. Na 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 na. Na 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 na. Jude, da da do da 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 ba da da boom. Da da da. Hey Jude, 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 Judy, Judy.